Hi guys, it's Jess and welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if it is your first time here. Today I'm going to be filming my January wrap-up video for you. This is a video featuring all of the books that I read in the month of January, and I had a much better reading month this month than I had in December. I don't know if it's because December's just such a hectic month and January by contrast really just kind of flowed along. I didn't really do very much, but I read 6 books in the month of January and I pretty much enjoyed them all, which again I think is very good. So without further ado, let's jump straight into the books. The first book that I read in the month of January is The Lost Hero, Heroes of Olympus by Rick Riordan. This is the first book in Rick Riordan's second Percy Jackson series, but this series has a slightly different slant to it. In this book we meet 3 new characters, Jason, Piper and Leo, who are new recruits to Camp Half-Blood, and although this is a Percy Jackson novel and it is set in Percy Jackson's world, he is only mentioned by name. He doesn't actually feature in this book. And Rick Riordan, for this particular book, I'm not sure about the rest of the series, but in this particular book has begun to explore the Roman version of the Greek gods. So the Romans took their gods very much from the Greek gods, but they were slightly different. They had different names and they had slightly different personalities, and he begins to explore that in this book. And our protagonist really is Jason. He is a young guy who turns up at Camp Half-Blood, but he can't remember how he got there, and he only kind of has little glimpses of who he was. And I won't tell you, he does find out who he was at the end of the book, and I won't tell you that because I don't want to spoil it. But these are just really enjoyable books. They are aimed at middle grade age, or I think age 8+, so you know, they're just very easy to read, light-hearted books. And the thing that I really love about Rick Riordan's writing is that he manages to capture these kind of teenagers in all their angsty ways of being and wanting to fit in, and he just manages to capture that so well, but without making it annoying or uncomfortable, and actually more humorous than anything else. So if you like light-hearted books and you have kind of a mild interest in Greek mythology or Roman mythology, then I would highly recommend these ones. The second book that I picked up in the month of January was Still Life by Louise Penny. This is a series of books which I picked up after hearing Katie from Life Between Words talk about how much she enjoyed them, and they are kind of cozy murder mystery type books. So this series of books follows Chief Inspector Armand Gamache, who is a detective working in the Quebec police, I think, if I've remembered correctly. And this particular book takes him to a very small town called Three Pines, where a older woman has been murdered, and she was a very well known and very well loved person in the town. And it's the sort of town where everybody knows everybody else's business and everybody has a secret, and they're all trying to hide something. And really, as we discover through the story, it could have been any of them who had a motive to commit the murder. And so it was just written extremely well. It was a really easy read. As you can see, it's not a very big book. And I really liked the conclusion as well. I thought that the writing was slightly more formal than I have come to expect from this type of book, but I really enjoyed it, and I highly recommend it if you like cozy murder mysteries, and I will definitely be continuing on with this series. Then, as I shared with some of you earlier on in the year over on Instagram, which I will link my Instagram channel down below if you're interested to go and see some more bookish stuff over there, I was trying to read more classic literature, and it's the kind of thing that I want to read, but I just find it such hard going, and I have to read the books so slowly just to try and even have a chance of understanding what is going on. But I am determined that this year I will read some more classic literature, and I started the year strong by reading Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen. This is a book about 2 sisters who are very much just trying to find their place in life. They're really just trying to find their way in a society where marriage is everything. A woman doesn't really have a role other than to marry well and not necessarily marry for love. And the thing that I really enjoyed about this book is that the 2 sisters have very different personalities. You have Eleanor, who's the oldest, who is very steadfast and reliable and very sensible, and you have Marianne, who is very much driven by her desires and her passions and her whims, and the two sisters somehow balance each other out, and their life journeys are not how they would have anticipated or expected, and they don't work out the way that they want to, and yet they somehow come to a very nice conclusion nonetheless. And that's pretty much what I got from it. I know that that's probably a really rubbish synopsis of the book, and I will admit that I found it very, very difficult to read at parts, and the paragraphs are just so long without any kind of break that often I would read it and think, I have literally no idea what is happening now. So I'm not sure that I am particularly a fan of classics, but I did enjoy it, and I think that Jane Austen does have a very interesting way of looking at the world, and there were several times when I was laughing out loud at some of the observations that she was making and the commentary that she was passing on society at this time. So I did enjoy it, and I am going to persevere with reading more classics. So that was the third book I read. Then I picked up Between Shades of Grey by Ruta Sepetys. This is a book that absolutely devastated me. I was just completely unprepared for how moved I would be by the story. This is about a Lithuanian girl whose family are taken off to a camp in the middle of nowhere in Siberia by Russian secret police, and she is separated from her father. She goes with her mother and her brother, and they are basically sent to a work camp as Stalin is basically trying to exterminate the native people from all the countries that he has invaded, Lithuania being one. And so all these people are kind of stuck onto trains and just sent into work camps in the most awful conditions. And it very much is, it's set during the time of the Second World War, and it very much is that kind of work camp, concentration camp type story, but it's just a thread of history that I have never come across before. I was completely unaware that this had happened during this time, and I was just particularly moved by the sense of hope that was contained within this book, and perseverance, and that despite the most awful conditions and the cruelest of treatment, that people's sense of being and their relationships flourished, and just, yeah, it was just a really read. And the thing is, it's not a particularly long book. It doesn't go into masses of detail. It just tells a snapshot of this young girl's life and how she has to adjust to life in this work camp in Siberia, and how she has to face the knowledge that an entire country want to exterminate her people, and how they hold on to who they are and their customs. And it just was brilliant. I have probably completely mashed up that description because my feelings are just all in a jumble. I just think that everybody should read this book. I loved it. I thought the writing was really accessible, and I was just really moved by the story, so I would highly recommend it if you can make an ounce of sense out of that description. The next book that I picked up was Queen of Shadows by Sarah J Maas. This wasn't on my TBR for January, but I'm slowly making my way through this series so that I can move on to her next series, and this is the fourth book. It's a huge book, and it really just picks up the story, so I can't go into too much detail, but in essence this is about a young girl called Selena Sardothian, who is a trained assassin, and she is taken off to a prison called Endovia. She is then freed from that prison and taken to work for the king, and the king basically wants her to be a contract killer for him. And so we kind of follow her adventures. It turns out that she isn't necessarily who you think she is. There are all kinds of threads, there are all kinds of stories. We live in a world where magic did once exist but has vanished from the world, and that there are people who had magical powers who are being hunted and killed, and some people want to free magic. There are rebels. It's just all very fantastical and easygoing. I don't massively love the protagonist Selena in these books. I find her very difficult to read about. I find her very difficult to get on with, but I am, as the books go on, I am appreciating more and more the exterior characters. So for example, Manon, who is an Iron Teeth witch, I love her storyline. I don't necessarily read books about witchcraft, but but her story and her character and her personality I really, really enjoy, and I find myself rooting for her. Also Kale, I really, really love and enjoy his storyline. So for me it's more about the surrounding characters rather than the main protagonist, but I'm appreciating very much where she's going with this, and I am looking forward to seeing where the story concludes. So yeah, that was that one. And then the final book that I read this month was Burial Rites by Hannah Kent, and this is a fiction novel which is based on a true story of the last woman to be executed in Iceland in the 1820s. And Hannah Kent, basically, I read the author's note and she went on a journey to Iceland, came across this story and was just really intrigued by this woman who was described as a cold-blooded murderess. And so basically it's the story of Agnes, who is a workmaid, and she is accused along with two other people of murdering her master and a guest that was staying in their home. They killed them and then they set fire to the farmstead. And whilst Agnes is awaiting a date for her execution, she is sent to live with a family, and a priest comes to visit her, and the priest's job is to kind of help her get used to wanting to meet her end. But we sort of begin to understand Agnes's story, and we get a narrative of her life, and I just really, really enjoyed this. I appreciated that it's sort of a alternative version of who Agnes might have been. A lot of Icelandic history suggests that she was just a murderess, but Hannah Kent's kind of elaborated on that and thought about maybe why she might have been driven to do these things, if she did these things at all. Some of the facts that are included in here is that the district commissioner at the time very much wanted to make an example out of Agnes, and so maybe Agnes wasn't as guilty as we were all, as people were led to believe at the time. And I just really, really appreciated it. It is a very moving story about a young woman who basically got dealt a whole load of rubbish, and you know, she's a woman, so her station in life is not very great. She's a pauper, she's an orphan, she's a workmaid, so she doesn't have a lot of options when it comes to the way that her life is going to play out, and she's quite powerless, and she finds herself in a very abusive and negative situation and has to kind of come to terms with where her life has led her and how she ended up here. And it's just a very, very sad story which does have an inevitable end. And the thing that I really liked was that the whole way through I really felt for Agnes, and I was really hoping that perhaps Hannah Kent would have taken some liberties with the ending of the story and changed it, but of course she doesn't, and Agnes is executed, and that isn't a spoiler because it's the story of the last woman who was executed in Iceland, so you know, you kind of know that she's going to be executed. But yeah, I just really enjoyed it. It was a very quiet read. It did take me quite a while to get into it because nothing really happens. It is just this slow moving narrative about this young girl's life, and yeah, it is one of those quiet, moving stories that make you reflect. I think the thing that really struck me is how similar in age I was to Agnes, and how I can't imagine ever being in a situation where I am so powerless and somebody could have complete and utter control over me and I wouldn't be able to escape, and I found that part particularly moving. And I also really, really enjoyed the backdrop. I don't think I have ever read a book set in Iceland, and I liked the way that Hannah Kent had kind of drawn on some Icelandic sagas to sort of flesh out the whole story as well. So if you haven't read this, or if you have thought about it and considered it, then I would definitely recommend it. It's very thought-provoking, it's very moving, it's actually a very gripping story. Even though it is slow moving, you do find yourself completely caught up in the story and the possibilities, so I would highly, highly recommend this book. So those are the books that I read in the month of January. I am currently debating my February TBR, so if you have any recommendations, or if you want to chat about any of the books that I read, or any of the books that you read during January, then of course do leave me a comment down below. I always love to chat with you guys, or you can find me on any of my social media channels. I'm always over there as well. Thank you for watching. All the usual, don't forget to give me the thumbs up and subscribe if you want to see more content, and I will see you all soon. Bye!